Change lives.
Cambiar vidas.
Change lives.
Change organizations.
حياته.
改变世界。
Change organization.
Change
Dunia
organization.
membedlau.
Transformar el mundo.
Change the world.
It's truly a pleasure to be here. Of course, being a good businessman, I try to size up the competition and checked on who's been here. Thank you. 3 meetings ago, you had the CEO of Citigroup, one of those institutions that are too big to fail but keep failing. And you had a partner from McKinsey. And last week, as you mentioned, Dean, you had the president of Turkey. So a banker, a consultant, and a politician, and you're rounding up that list of most popular institution with big oil. So, but seriously, it's indeed nice to be here. I of course, love the Bay Area. I had the fortune that Aramco sent me here on a working assignment in San Francisco back early in my career in the very early 80s. And like all of you, I'm sure this is an area that one can't resist. And then, of course, our company extends back in history. Our roots are actually in the Bay Area. Aramco, Saudi Aramco is the Saudi Arabian oil company today. But we started with a concession to Standard Oil of California, and the first name of the company that ran that concession was called California Arabian Standard Oil Company. So California was ahead of Arabian in the roots of Saudi Aramco. And of course, to top it off, just a couple of weeks ago, my youngest son has announced that he's joining Stanford in September. So this is just to round. So you may be seeing more of me in the future. But it's truly a pleasure to be here. This is the finest school, in my opinion, on many fronts, and certainly the business school ranks as one of the best. And in fact, I have some of my colleagues who are products of your executive education program and also the School of Earth Sciences. Those historic links with the institution are reflected in many ways. Today, I mentioned colleagues, we have 40 Stanford graduates, the highest of which is actually the chairman of Saudi Aramco and our Minister of Petroleum, who is also a graduate of the School of Earth Sciences and Geology. And we have 13 students who are enrolled here. I hope some of them are here. Okay, good. I saw 13 hands. If not, you are going to hear from me. But we also had 30 MBAs, I understand, earlier this year. I tried to meet them when they were here. Are there any of the MBAs who came to Saudi Arabia in the crowd today and visited the company? I see a few hands. I hope you enjoyed your trip and it was instructive and useful for you. And certainly we hope that more of these exchanges between our employees and the students of Stanford will be continuing in the future. Later on tonight, I will be having the pleasure of joining with your provost, Etchemendi, Dr. Etchemendi, and some of the leadership of the School of Earth Sciences to celebrate an endowment that Saudi Aramco is putting in place to endow a chair in the name of Max Steinecke that the Dean has talked about, our first chief geologist and a pioneer in every meaning of the word. If I can elaborate on what he said, this man who came from very humble beginnings, had his education here at Stanford, went and tried finding oil in Indonesia and Alaska and elsewhere, and just thought that the frontier place to go to was the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So he called Chevron and said, you just signed a concession with the kingdom, and I want to be part of it. And he was sent to a country with no roads, no airports, no air conditioning, no electricity for that matter. Literally, a country that was hundreds of years behind at that time in terms of infrastructure and amenities to support life. And he mapped the whole kingdom. There were no maps. And started drilling after 5 years of frustration. The headquarters office in San Francisco up the road sent a cable to the people in the field and ordered them to stop working. Well, Max didn't want to hear of this, so he hid the instruction from his team, and they were drilling at that time the 7th well, and ordered them to drill a little deeper after receiving that instruction. Well, the rest is history, because drilling a little deeper, they discovered our first gusher, our first commercial oil discovery, and Dammam number 7, which became Lucky number 7, and later on was named by the king of the kingdom as the Prosperity well. Since then, more oil has been produced by our company than any other company in the world. So it's inspired by this instruction and the spirit of Steineke, of drilling a little deeper, that I would like to talk to you today. I'd like to drill a little bit deeper about Saudi Aramco, and I think the Dean did a good job of giving you some of the top-line numbers and our position in the market. But for you to really make sense of my views from the top, as the lecture series is called, you really need to understand what is happening at the bottom, so to speak, and a cross-section of functions and levels of the company. So I will try to drill a little bit deeper about what Aramco is, what it is context, and how it runs its business nationally, globally, and in the very important energy markets. Now, one thing I want to be careful, because I know this lecture is taped, and I don't want later on to be used as evidence. I'm not encouraging any of you to refuse the instructions of your bosses when they ask you to do something. So although we're very happy with the fact that Steineke continued drilling and discovered oil, the intent, always we encourage our people to listen to instructions from their management. Let me start by giving you that in-depth presentation about what the company does and where we are. As I mentioned, we produce more oil than any other company. The Dean mentioned that we're producing 10%. Actually, the numbers has gone up. You can count today that we produce 1 out of every 7 barrels of oil produced around the world. That is 10 million out of about 72 million barrels of oil that are produced globally. Saudi Aramco is also a significant gas producer. We are one of the top gas producers in the world. We are the only one that has any spare production capacity to speak of. As a company, we have more than half of the global spare oil production capacity. So our decisions on production, our ability to respond, or, God forbid, not being able to respond could have consequences not only to the oil market, but to the global economy that are not equaled or not matched by any other company in the world. This, of course, requires not just reserves and resources, which we have plenty of, but it requires unique capabilities, operational capabilities, technical capabilities, financial capabilities, management and leadership capabilities, and the ability to lead in a business that is the most politicized of any business. The oil market is highly politicized, as you all know. In downstream, in addition to that dominant position in the upstream, we are also quite sizable. We have joint ventures around the world, and we have a sizable refining capacity in the kingdom, and our operations range from here in the US all the way extending in China and Japan and Korea in Asia. In terms of our financial position, we're probably one of the very few, probably the only company I know of our size and scale that have no debt on our balance sheet. We are so strong financially that we have been financially long in our cash flow for as long as I can remember. We pay taxes and royalty, and we have an arm's length relationship with the shareholder, which is the tax collector at the same time. We fund our own capital and operating expenditures, and then we pay dividends afterwards, but we've never been in a situation where we as Saudi Aramco have to borrow money to fund our operations. So we're fiscally responsible and capable as a company. Of course, with this competence, financial position, and influence on global markets, energy and otherwise, there comes a lot of responsibility. There comes a lot of global responsibility because we always look at the influence that oil has on global economy, and we have to manage that relationship very carefully. But also being the national oil company of a developing country like Saudi Arabia, that is still relatively early in its development cycle, we have a unique responsibility within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to leverage everything we have and enable the acceleration of the development of the kingdom. We are, of course, the predominant source of revenue for the kingdom. We are the only supplier of energy to businesses, utilities, and individuals within the kingdom. But beyond that, we are expected to do a lot more. In addition to what you would expect an oil and gas company to have, the drilling, the subsurface reservoir management, the vast operating plant for upstream, midstream, and downstream, given the concentration and complexity of our oil and gas core business and the scale of what we do, we also run a lot of support businesses that are unique for any company of any kind. We have a significant fleet of aircraft, both fixed wing and helicopter, to manage our operations. We have hundreds of marine vessels that manage both our offshore production as well as our transportation of crude around the world. We have housing compounds that houses tens of thousands of our employees and their families. We have remote area camps that support our plants in the desert. We have a healthcare system that has hundreds of thousands of patients that we fully support on all of their medical care. So the company, in addition of being at scale, to say the least, in oil and gas, we have all of these unique and diverse support services that make Saudi Aramco indeed one of a kind. Now, because of the breadth and complexity of these various mandates that I talked about, the international, the national, the business, it is always a challenge to remind ourselves to stay close to our mission. And let me just say, for your sake, what the mission is. Saudi Aramco's mission as an integrated international company is to engage in all activities related to the hydrocarbon industry on a commercial basis and for the purpose of profit. This is a very focused and a very smartly written mission statement to remind us that despite everything I said about the international, the geopolitical, the macroeconomic impact of the company, that ultimately at our core, just like any other multinational company, any other private company, we have to operate with profitability and commerciality first and foremost on our mind. That means a number of things. We have to execute at best-in-class levels. We never let the fact that we are a national oil company get in the way of being best-in-class in all of the key core operations of the company, whether it's our rate of discovery of hydrocarbons, how we recover them, our cost of production. And if we measure ourselves typically, we are the lowest cost or the highest performance in every metric that we use in measuring ourselves against our peers and the competition. We also have to constantly focus on building capacity and renewing ourselves. Our business is a long-term business, and being in Saudi Arabia, accessing talent is not easy. So we always have to build capacity from within, especially training and developing our own people. And I talked about the various people we have sent to Stanford over the many decades, and we'll continue to do that. So building capacity for the company is something that we have done and we will continue to do. Managing execution means that we have to work on day-to-day operations extremely closely. We never get away, and you have seen in the headlines what oil companies get into if they ever miss a step, so to speak. So focusing on day-to-day operations, ours is probably by far the most risky and dangerous business of any business out there, and we focus on safety, environmental stewardship, and operational reliability. I talked earlier about the impact of Saudi Aramco slipping on its commitments, and we never take a chance on allowing that to happen. We also have to invest very, very wisely. Every dollar we invest, we ensure will have the highest possible rate of return. The upstream is always first, but we are long on capital, so we look also at our downstream, which for those of you not familiar with the industry, that means the refining, the chemical, the marketing, and trading businesses. Just yesterday, I was in Texas for inaugurating a $10 billion refinery at Port Arthur. This is an expansion of a refinery that was built initially in 1903, and we bought into in a joint venture with Texaco, which ultimately became with Shell. And this $10 billion will take probably a few decades for it to pay off, but that's the kind of business we're in, investing for the long term, and our assets and facilities are designed for that purpose. Earlier in March, I was in China, and we signed a number of agreements, joint venturing with a number of Chinese firms to invest both in China and various downstream facilities there, as well as cementing an agreement already in place to build a refinery on the west coast of Saudi Arabia. So we're involved in the Western Hemisphere as well as in emerging markets in Asia, and China is not the only one. Last month in Tokyo, we had our board meeting, and one of the presentations in that board meeting was by our upstream engineers and scientists who were presenting our long-term production profile, showing where we would be producing literally in the next century. So we're looking 100 years in advance at how we will continue to steward and produce the resources we've already identified and booked, as well as to unlock additional resources through a commitment to science and exploration and investing in long-term program. Now, these are programs that would keep any company extremely busy and challenged, but I already alluded to a unique position that Saudi Aramco in, which is being the engine of a whole nation of about 30 million that is relatively early in its development cycle. So in addition to all of the financial contributions we make, the whole nation expects Saudi Aramco to do a lot more in leveraging our capabilities, enhancing human resource development within the kingdom, partnering with educational institutions. Today, one of the colleagues I have with me is the Executive Vice President of KAUST, which is the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology. This is a university that we built from scratch, and we aim for it to be an equivalent of Stanford not too long into the future. focusing on the specific disciplines that it's focused on, which is science and technology. Also, we are leveraging the various downstream investments I talked about to create value addition in manufacturing and attracting investment, either of our own, our partners, or third parties to create value addition and jobs for a young population, which is a demographic challenge that the kingdom and many countries in the Middle East have. A fourth challenge that I would mention is the fact that oil is a political commodity. It is quite intertwined with not only economy, but also environmental issues, geopolitical issues, and that complexity creates a lot of pressure on the industry. There is a lot of debate. They say that all of the debate you hear about energy and oil creates a lot of heat, but unfortunately not much light. And we try to do our bit to engage in that debate. So you will find oil executives in my company and myself engaged in discussions ranging from the World Economic Forum to G20 discussions to developing countries discussions like in China when I was there in March to try to enlighten the public opinion about energy and the central role that fossil fuels will continue to play for decades to come until we're able to transition in a more rational way to renewables and other sources of energy. So to recap on the little deep drilling that I was trying to do today on the company, we are the world's largest and I would argue the most successful and profitable energy enterprise, but we do face tremendous challenges as an industry and in terms of development of our nation, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as a host of other challenges we have. But I think the important thing that we realize is we have great opportunities ahead of us. The challenges are manageable and we are dealing with them, and what we are looking for are the opportunities we have. When I took office in 2009 and I looked at the company and I just recited to myself some of the things I just mentioned to you, you could make an argument that the best thing we could do was continue to operate at best in class, improve incrementally on the areas where improvements are required, and basically protect the great company we have. However, we viewed tremendous opportunities available to Saudi Aramco, opportunities available at the international level, opportunities available at the national level, and a huge deal of untapped potential within the company, leveraging the fiscal position we have, the financial position, leveraging the talent that many of our people want, and the desire to do more and contribute more to the company and to themselves and to their nation and to the world. So we launched, after much deliberation and consensus building within the company, we launched a program that we termed the Accelerated Transformation Program. Maybe take this jacket. At that time, to build that consensus, one of the metaphors we used as we went around and talked amongst ourselves as a leadership team and then with the rest of the company, Saudi Aramco was in an equal position to a racing car, to a Formula One vehicle. But it's a Formula One vehicle that is being driven within the city and going through stoplights and intersections and therefore driving at a much slower speed than its full potential. And the only way that Saudi Aramco would be able to attain its full potential would be take it out from the inner city, put it on the superhighway, rev up the engine, and get it to drive at its full potential. And basically, the limitation we figured at that time was us. Are we really allowing the company to get there or not? So we launched this accelerated transformation program, and I will just mention briefly what we ultimately came up with, which is the strategic intent of the company. And it's quite ambitious. It says in 2020, Saudi Aramco will be the world's leading integrated energy and chemicals company, focusing on maximizing its income, facilitating the sustainable and diversified expansion of the kingdom's economy, and enabling a globally competitive and vibrant Saudi energy sector. So in addition to growing the company substantially in its portfolio, we linked into our basically vision statement for 2020 an element of enabling a whole national economy to transform, to diversify, and to get into a knowledge base less dependent on us as the sole source of revenue. Those 39 words became basically the mandate I give to my management in every interactions I have with them. Now that's a very ambitious program we have, but translating it down to execution was a whole different matter. So we cascaded it down into 14 different initiatives. And those 14 initiatives were categorized in 4 different pillars that are driving the strategic transformation, which is now 1 year in the making. The first pillar is what you would call Strategy 101. It's basically reshaping the portfolio of Saudi Aramco and rebalancing the company from being predominantly upstream oil and gas, basically producing raw materials, to one where we will have a strong position, stronger than we already have in the downstream. We'll be the world's largest refiner. We'll be one of the largest chemical company. We will have a huge position in power generation, including, you might be surprised to hear, renewables as we go forward. The second pillar was about a focused program to leverage everything we do to help the national economy of Saudi Arabia, not just in our immediate businesses, but extending beyond. So we have partnerships with education, we have research partnerships in the kingdom, we have manufacturing hubs that we're creating to support us, but at the same time to create jobs. These 2 pillars are challenging and huge for any other organization. But in my opinion, and I think in the view of anybody who has tried to do change within an organization, the other 2 pillars are the most difficult ones. Those you can size up, you can execute on, you can measure, money can buy them to a large degree. The second and the third and the fourth are the ones that require true leadership. One of them is capacity building. So reinvigorating the leadership of the company. We have a great leadership today, and we have taken the company to where it is, and there are no regrets. But for the company of the future, we need a new style of leadership, and we need new leadership capabilities. And we're working on our human resources from the bottom up to create the next leaders of the company. We have, in 4 years' time, 40% of the company workforce will be below the age of 30. So dealing with the Y generation, so to speak, is an opportunity as much as a challenge that we have to seize and deliver on. The other part of capability building, in addition to leadership and human resources, is technology and building enough research and development with the company to keep us almost self-sufficient. We have a good deal of that going on now, but we will multiply it by an order of magnitude in the year to come. The fourth pillar is changing how we do business. I think I've described to a large degree what we do and changing what we do, but then changing how we do things will be even more challenging. And that is reinventing all of our business procedures and systems within the company. And that is very tough, because these systems and procedures have been good for us. They've gotten us to where we are, to the leadership position we enjoy today. And to convince people that we will go through the change process, which is not easy, and throw away the systems and processes that have gotten us to where we are, there is a lot of selling, and then there is a lot of pain and execution. So we've already overhauled our planning process, strategy development, as well as capital project execution in order to get to that next 5–10% of excellence that we think we need to get to be the world's not only leading and largest and most profitable, but also most admired company in our space of energy and oil and gas. Now, resistance to change will always be there to any firm, even firms that are in trouble. But it's particularly difficult for a firm that is successful, where the stakeholders from the outside are constantly praising you on being the reliable supply of energy to all corners of the world, where the kingdom looks and your nation looks at you as an example of success, where your neighbors are always thankful for your attention to environment, safety, and their well-being. So when you come to all of the stakeholders and say, that's good, but it's not good enough, we need to go to the next level of excellence, it takes some selling. But when the opportunities are presented that are to be attained by going through this change, I was surprised by how much consensus we were able to build around it and how much energy and enthusiasm. And I thought I would be pulling a lot, and now I am being pushed from the back by the momentum that has been created around the ATP. So I think I'm taking probably as much time as I should take in that deep drill that I wanted to give you on the company and our strategy and a little bit of our history. I will just end with a metaphor, if I may, on how we looked at our strategy. And in this metaphor, I will call on an athlete called the Great One. And you will be, this is, for those of you who don't know, this is Wayne Gretzky. He's a hockey player. And you probably never thought that a Saudi oil man will be will be giving you a metaphor about a hockey player. But Wayne Gretzky is reported to have said, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going to be. And that's exactly how we think at Saudi Aramco. We're not running after what we're doing today. We're running after where we want to be in 10, 20, 30, or even 50 years from now. And we're trying to position the company to go from the greatness it has achieved over almost 80 years of history to leading our business and sector for 80 years to come. And of course, I would just caution that thinking big and thinking strategic, you should never lose sight of managing execution, managing day-to-day, and staying fit. I'm sure Wayne Gretzky had the smarts and had the sixth sense of knowing where to be, but he also worked very hard of being as fit as the other guy and working well with a team, which is exactly what I try to do, building a strong team within my company and a strong teaming relationship with the partners we have around the world. So that's all I wanted to say in my opening remarks, and I look forward to the Q&A. This side or that? Either one.
Thanks again for joining us here from View from the Top. It's very fitting to have you as our last speaker for the series, given the value of Saudi Aramco is greater than the combined value of all of our prior 12 CEOs that we've had. You talked a lot about education and the investment Saudi Aramco is making. I had a question from a personal side. What role has education, both your time here in the U.S. and your graduate school, played for you as a leader and in shaping your thoughts about leadership?
Well, for me, it works in two ways. I would say education has taken me from my humble beginnings, where I quite frankly didn't have a view of the world, to where I am today, and for that I'm very thankful. But the flip side of that, I think, in education is it taught me how much I don't know. There are things I know, and there are things that I continuously learn, which is something I learned in school. Of course, I'm sure all of you have learned great things, but rest assured, in 10 years, much of it will be obsolete. So the beauty about a good education is it gets you curiosity and a willingness and an ability to constantly renew your knowledge and learn new things. But for me also importantly is it taught me how much I don't know, how much out there that could be learned, if not by me directly, at least by my colleagues, by my institution. So it planted in me a belief that without pursuing the highest degree of education as an individual, as a family, in my own family, as an institution in Saudi Aramco, and as a nation, you not only stand still, but you actually slip behind, because the world is constantly advancing. And we all need to keep pace. And for those of us who aspire to lead, you just need to lead through education. And that's a belief that I try to, as I mentioned, plant it in the family, in the company, and in our interaction with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia educational institutions.
It's great to hear. I know you've done tremendous things around education in Saudi Arabia. Another question that I had was around, as a leader, you inevitably must face setbacks that come across in decisions that you've made. What have you done to kind of face them? And if you can give us an example of a setback and a lesson you've drawn from that.
I'm not sure I should give examples, but I'll talk generically. You know, I think in life in general, whether it's in business or in our private lives, the road forward always has zigzags. So if you believe in yourself and if you believe in your values and if the objectives that you're working for, you take those setbacks in stride and you know there will be a better day. And of course, one thing that I talk to my colleagues in the company, especially in the reinvigorated Saudi Aramco of the future that we're trying to take, is we have to take risks. And risks means that many of the decisions we make, we will try to mitigate the risks, we'll calculate, and we will develop what-if scenarios, and if it doesn't work, what do we do? But once we make the decision, we accept that it may fail, and we move on. We learn the lessons and move forward. So that has been a motto for me all of my life. Rarely have I met all expectations that I set for myself in serious. There is always, every so many steps forward, there is a step back, and you just work with it.
Great. Well, I'd love to open it up to questions from the audience at this point, if there are any.
Thanks for coming. You talked about the importance of planning long-term, including 100 years ahead. Given the changes in the industry, including the fracking and shale gas extraction, discovery of oil in Utah, as well as nuclear explosion, how do you see the changes in the industry, and how are you going to respond to the change strategically?
Well, we have been arguing for a long time, way before the unconventional game-changing developments here in the US became common knowledge, that the hydrocarbon resource base on Earth are huge. They are not what is booked today as conventional oil reserves. There is a lot more that will be added to reserves as the technology develops and the performance of the industry improves in terms of the rate of discovery and recovery of those reserves improves. And the last 10 to 15 years have proven us correct. We have in the US now added production, and the US has reversed its production decline that has been taking place for a number of decades, and actually now the US is increasing. To us, that's a good thing, because it proves a point that peak oil, as it was called a few years ago, is not accurate, at least in the terms of the timing of when the decline will take place, that we have many, many years left in the resource endowment of the Earth to manage the transition of an economy and a global society that is dependent on hydrocarbons today to other renewable sources and other alternatives that will be developed more economically and in a more rational fashion if we allow it the time to do that. So we don't have to respond. Our production will continue to be there. Saudi Aramco will continue to be the lowest cost producer for as long as there is oil production in the world. And the last oil produced, I assure you, will be produced by Saudi Aramco in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So we have nothing to worry about from the unconventionals. We welcome them, and I think we also, as I mentioned earlier, welcome the role of renewables, and we will be working ourselves with renewables to provide a diverse energy mix to, to a world population that needs it.
Saudi Arabia takes some criticism for internal energy consumption levels. And do you, as a leader of the domestic producer, think about that or have influence on that?
We think about that, and we have influence about that, and we talked about that. We, in fact, the first alarm bells, I rang them a few years ago in a talk in Riyadh, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and since then, the dialogue has continued, and there is increased awareness. I would just caution that some of the numbers that are published are exaggerated, and they're all assuming the as-is conditions continuing, that there will be no introduction of efficiency measures, that the kingdom will continue to be wasteful in energy use in the future, and that's not correct. The government has taken on a number of serious measures, including creating an agency that is focused on bringing in renewables and nuclear to complement oil and gas in the energy mix. There is a center that has been set, and Saudi Aramco is participating in it to bring in efficiency and utilization of energy. And of course, we're busy exploring for and will be producing unconventional gas, we hope, shale gas in the future that will displace some of the oil and oil products that are being consumed domestically.
So we have a last student question.
Hello, my name is Mohammed Saadi from Lebanon, so it's an honor to have someone from our region representing Saudi Aramco. My question is, Saudi Arabia and a lot of other countries in the Gulf have historically relied on talent from outside the borders to build a lot of their great companies, and now there seems to be a push from governments, whether in like the UAE or Saudi Arabia, to push for the local workforce to enter and take on more of these roles, like the Emiratization initiative in the UAE or Sawada and Saudi Arabia. And my question is, what are your thoughts on these initiatives? How does it impact you as a business as well?
Well, I would go back to the story I mentioned about the American oil companies, that own Saudi Aramco. We give them a lot of credit for investing in Saudiization, as you called it, Mohammed, and localization. And some of the graduates I mentioned, our chairman, who graduated 50 years ago, actually, out of Stanford, were sent by the American company. So it is in our heritage. We are not getting directives to do it. We've always been today we have 80 nationalities, by the way, in our workforce. So we're quite a diverse company with both genders working within Saudi Aramco and 80 nationalities representing most countries in the world. But the fact is, most of our operations today are in Saudi Arabia, and it makes sense to hire local, whether you're a Saudi or not. It's more cost effective, more reliable, less turnover, and it just makes good business sense. So we've done it all these decades on the basis of being a good business, and we are a good citizen, of course. Our company is not going to solve the employment challenge in Saudi Arabia. As the Dean mentioned, 55,000, 56,000 employees today in a country that needs millions of jobs. But we try to create job opportunities in the business sector that we deal with, our suppliers, our customers, our contractors. We give them training. We work with them hand in hand to create job opportunities for the hundreds of thousands of Saudi job seekers that are out there looking for jobs.
Great, and I'd like to ask one last question before we wrap up. A question that all of us here at the GSB answer in our process to be admitted here is, what matters most to you and why? People have answered from a range of family to reading books, and would love to ask you that question, how you would answer it as a leader of such an important company.
Well, one thing is difficult, you know, obviously the emotional side comes first, and one has to say my family is first, and that's the truth. But taking that for granted, that all of us have their families as their first instinctive thing or issue they care for, then what is the next thing? And for me, the next thing is making an impact that will be remembered and will be important for all of the stakeholders that I can impact. The employees of the company, the shareholder and the nation of Saudi Arabia, and the global community that we serve as a company. So running the company the best way we can to meet its objectives and the expectation, the legitimate expectations of our stakeholders, to me, is something that I think about constantly. It is more than having a good financial performance at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year. It's more than finishing a set of projects on time, on budget. It is more than the short to intermediate metrics that we all measure ourselves for. It's something, you know, a higher purpose that I believe Saudi Aramco and everybody that works in our company serves, not only ourselves as employees of the company, not only our nation as the major stakeholder in the company, but in every meaning of the word, the global community, which the company serves by providing reliable supplies of energy and keeping the global markets stable for as long as we can.
Great. Please join me in thanking Mr. Faleh.
Thank you.
Change lives.
Cambiar vidas.
Change lives.
Change organizations. 改变世界。Change organizations.
Change organizations.
Change the world.